Hello, book lovers. We are back for the month of February 2026. I'm your host, Marisa Serafini, of course, joined always along by Phil Svitek. And this month we're doing I'm Waiting for You and Other Stories by Kim Bo Young. This is also my book choice because we're doing January and February. My book, we had to double up so we can switch our months. But so we're following up with another book choice of mine. I have never heard of this book. I have never actually heard of this author until going back into the research. I was like, oh, I know of other works, but I didn't realize it was this person. But quick thoughts, Phil.
Yeah, I like her style. On the cover of the books that you and I read, it has a Bong Joon-ho quote. Bong Joon-ho, famous Korean director, Parasite, among other things. And so I'm intrigued, and just as a quick side tangent, both about this book, but in general about what we do. It's fun when we get to explore and discover new books, and then you kind of see them out in the world. So I started seeing this book at like airports and bookstores, and not just like random, but like prominently featured. And then, funny enough, we did Midnight Library, and like half our friend group is all of a sudden for their various book clubs reading Midnight Library. So I feel like we're ahead of the curve on some of this, even though we're picking books that have obviously are very famous and already bestsellers. But yeah, regardless, I love kind of learning different authors, different cultures, right? This is a Korean book. And it is interesting, like, you and I don't know Korean, but I would be very interested in, like, I wish I knew more languages so I can read it more directly. Because not saying the translation is bad, but it's just I don't know how to value it because I don't know the original versus this. And obviously, it's a very heady book. And I would love to see it in its original language to see how heady that is. Again, anyone doing a translation for anything, kudos to them. I actually like the more and more I'm immersed in that side of things in my own life. Like kudos for translations. Like it's a unglorious job, but obviously very important so that you and I get to read amazing authors that we wouldn't have access to if there wasn't a translation, right? So those are my random scattered thoughts.
No, I totally agree with all of that. Going back to, I love how you're saying that like these books are coming up and they're like being more ingrained. You're noticing them. Like I remember our conversation on Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous, and like you said, someone else came up to you saying that they were also reading the book. And it's like, God forbid, I'm actually like connected to Book Talk and like realize what books are kind of trending or like ones that are, that should be more recognized and more and read. And I love that. I do love how we're, say, ahead of the curve in that aspect, because I feel like this is where, that's what I love about reading, and like the books that we have read and have already curated now, and because of our personalities and what we like, and just the algorithm really working for us and being like, hey, because you read these books, you probably read these too. And they're the ones that are getting populated out to the world. And I feel people are like getting on board with that too. So it's like, I feel like we're finding our people, so to speak. And I love that. And
Yeah.
also going for the translation part, I totally agree too. Because we both don't know Korean, but I think the challenge of the translation is the messages that are there at the end. Like, is this still a universal theme that people can still understand despite the language barrier? And I think that's where people's individual interpretations kind of get lost and mixed with the original text. Just the way that they grew up when it comes to like religion and faith and just, like their secular thoughts of like certain ways and deities, and so and that can get lost too with how someone was raised and the ways of their thinking compared to a different culture and their ways of how they treat their
But even just
beings and
idioms,
stuff.
right? Like
Yeah.
in Eastern Europe, there's kind of like this notion of like if you literally translate it, it means everywhere is good, but home is best. Now that sounds a little clunky in English, but in English you would just kind of translate to home sweet home, right?
Yeah.
So it's just those kind of things, and again, I'm not knocking it. It's just something I'm more cognizant of as time goes by, you know. So anyway, but happy to dive in and talk spoilers for I'm waiting for you and other stories.
Yeah, this book, we're definitely going to be spoiler heavy. So if you haven't read the book, pause us, go read the book, come back to us, and we're going to get all into it. This book, again, with a different structure than we normally have, uh, this kind of like threw me off a bit because it wasn't broken up in the way that I thought it would, like chronologically, that would make sense as a reader. Because we had there are four different stories. The first story and the fourth story are linked together, and the second and third story are linked together. Naturally, when you're reading a book, you think one and two should be, well, like one perspective, and then they flip the perspective, and that's the second story. But no, it's like you take one story, add two completely different stories in the middle, and then finish off the original story with the fourth. So it kind of broke up the momentum for me as a reader. Did that mess with you in any, or did you mind that, or maybe it didn't mind you?
Um, I mean, I got used to it, right? So I'm waiting for you and other stories. The other stories is a little bit misleading because there's just kind of one other story.
Yeah.
Um, and so, you know, part of it was I read the first one, which is called I'm Waiting for You. And then we get to the second story. And then we get to the third story. And I'm like, wait, these are the same characters. And this seems like the same situation from the second story. Oh, okay. This is just another chapter of said
Of the
story.
second story. Yeah.
You know, so once I figured it out, you know, then I kind of did, and I think it's an interesting structure. Um, I don't know. I'm kind of curious why do it in that way. I mean, to me, yeah. Eventually, like I just had to piece it in my mind of how it all worked. I think it's analogous to like a Christopher Nolan type of
Mm,
book where like it's very
non-linear.
heavy, and I think out of all the books that we've read, this is one that I think begs rereading in order for you to like truly comprehend. So I don't know about you. I'm going to do my best to talk about it, but I think I'm going to stick to more themes and broader strokes. Obviously, I understood what happened, but still, it just demands that sort of closer examination once you have a lay of the land. And obviously, unless you tell me otherwise, you and I just read it once.
No, I totally agree, and I think this is why I asked, because I was kind of thrown off not knowing what the structure was going to be like. Because you know me, I'm big into romance. Read the first story; it's actually really easy to follow. I think just structurally, you're really following a man chronologically, just waiting for his loved one in epistolary type of form. So it's easy to process and digest because they are just letters, and you can see his longing in real time, not in 170 years real time, but like you can understand like what he's waiting for, and you're with him through this journey from start to finish. And then that story just ends. You're like, but what happens? Did he ever meet with a woman? Is she dead? Is she whatever? And then we switch to story number two, completely unrelated to story number one. And the problem is story with, I shouldn't say problem. The thing is with story number two, it's introducing like more heavier themes and a completely different structure. It's not letters. It's uh, very granular in the sense of how this world is created, from the beings, the prophets splitting up, and the ideas of now all the prophets, second and third generations, making their own lives and autonomy and their thoughts and beings, and that's the heavier themes of like, okay, but how is this story related to this man who's longing for his wife? It's not. It's not. And that, me as an audience or as a reader, took me out of that. So like then I had a harder time getting into stories two and three because we're setting up a completely different world with deeper meanings and deeper characters and more details, and you're trying to understand what's happening here. Um, and so, fortunately, 2 and 3 were connected, but it is so much more dense than what 1 and 4 is, because the fourth story is now the woman's perspective from the man's perspective, who was waiting for her and
Yeah.
she was waiting for him. So it's just
So why
like,
don't we
what did I just read? So
why don't
we
we
can
break
like
it
break
up?
it down.
Yeah.
And 1, 4 is together, 2 and 3 are together. So I'll leave it to you, Phil. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Well, here's both the frustrating part and again why like I would love to revisit it and kind of do it on my own terms, because
Mhm.
if I had to do it all over again, I would read his first letter and her first letter,
Her first letter.
because there's a back and forth that obviously, you know, she chose not to have us do it to read it as such, but obviously that was in her mind. And you know, as a writer, you have to fill out the world even if you don't see it. And so for me, I would be very curious to see that back and forth. But if we're going to talk about his perspective first, because it comes first, I just loved the note, like from a science fiction standpoint, this idea of love, and that they're gonna they want to be together, and so they can't wait to be married. And so rather than wait the 4 months or whatever it is initially, you're going to do this interstellar travel, which will bypass the waiting, which seems on the surface, oh, okay, interesting. You know, why not? Until all of a sudden it goes haywire pretty quickly. And now they don't know how to find each other, because it's not a matter of where, like, they know the location. Now it's a matter of time.
Right.
And all of a sudden it becomes this horror-esque love story that you're just like stuck in time. You don't even know where and how to go. And, at first little by little time passes. And I love the dichotomy. Like, okay, he passes for a month, and yet in human terms, that's like 3 years. But by the end, he's lived for almost 100 years. Meanwhile, God knows what Earth time it is. So it's a very fascinating interstellar-esque. That's why also I use Nolan.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's very heady. And there's that back and forth of him being frustrated of like, okay, you don't love me anyway. I'm going to just do my own thing. It's like, oh, forgive me. I shouldn't have sent that letter. I was just on edge.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very bittersweet, and like, yeah, you understand. I don't know. I felt for it. I was really riveted and kept turning the pages. And then I was equally riveted with her side of it in response, even though I knew the broader strokes of what had happened with story 1 by the time I got to story technically 4. And so, yeah, there was this love for them. And yeah, I mean, God bless both of them, because, they were both kept being told of like, this person's either dead or they don't love you anymore. Like,
Right.
just
It's
let it
not going to
go.
happen, dude. Let it
And
go.
yeah,
Mhm.
so, and they transcended, and somewhat of a happy ending, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. I agree. So, like, as a reader, and if you want to read this book, I highly suggest reading 1 and 4 together, back to back, simultaneously. Like you said, kind of go back and forth in real time, because they will line up with each other. Their letters, just back and forth in their timeline. So basically, in the grand scheme of everything, to make this like really easy, it's like they agree to meet up at a certain point. They are space traveling, which already throws off the timeline. Just think about like, you know, people who are traveling. If you're at an airport and your plane gets delayed, what have you, that's going to mess up your meeting time, and it's going to delay things by like 20, 30, 40 minutes, whatever. But in this sense,
Real quick
it's
caveat.
years. Yes.
Yes, because as hard of a time as you might imagine accounting for time zones, imagine trying to account for light years. So
Yeah.
anyway,
These are light
continue on.
years. instead of minutes, they are years. They are like human years. So like what for the man it might only be a month, for the woman it's actually years. So like therefore you're trying to line up, it's like, oh, we're in this year for this woman, but we're in this year for this. Like how are they gonna meet if they're all so in different years in different places where and they're not even meeting up, and it's out of their control because the one ship breaks down and like circles back, and then like that messes up the other meeting, and he's trying to like hitch another plane, get a connecting flight, basically. Like I'm making it in the simplest terms. Like he's trying to find a connecting flight that will still take him to his destination, but even that plane is lost, and so like all these things happen that's just delaying their meetup time. And as time goes on, their realization and their love, or you can see it kind of in real time, like waning. They're like, I don't know if you still love me. I'm sorry for making you waiting for all these years. What person in the right mind would wait 8 years? What person in the right mind would wait 20 years? It's like, and I totally understand if you are already married and have kids and like decided years ago that you didn't want to be with me. So it's like you can see their mind and like their faith like diminish in this relationship. They're like, what's the point of even like still wanting to meet up with you when I know you're not there waiting for me? And that's the ironic part of the story, is called I'm waiting for you, but even these characters don't know if they're waiting for each other anymore.
Yeah, I mean, imagine, your loved one goes off to war, right? And there's the notion, how long are they going to be gone? Are they alive? This is like that, but to the nth degree. And
Mm-hmm.
did you read the author notes at the end? Just curious.
Yes, one only once.
Okay. Well, I raised that up because it's a funny inception to I'm waiting for you. So, as written, the author points out that this story was commissioned by someone who I guess was a fan of theirs and wanted a wedding story commissioned, like a love story. And the author, she was like, well, I do like speculative sci-fi, right? I don't really do love stories. And they're like, no, but we'll commission you and you could write something. And this is what they can. This is the wedding gift that they got at commission. Now,
Yeah.
I don't know if they're happy with the result, but yeah, obviously a very interesting, like that as the spark of what created this story.
Yeah, that is the catalyst. It's like, well, here you go, happy wedding, Mazel Tov, and it's like, and I love how the author was like, this seems like appropriate to attach to these other two stories that I've also been currently writing. Like, why not put it together in a book? We're like, okay, that's your logic behind like connecting all these stories together. Yeah, I had a laugh at that too. Um, very also very interesting. Let's switch to the woman's perspective of the waiting for you, but it's just like I'm on my way. So it's basically this woman. She's traveling, but she's in the very like opposite situation of what this man, because he went through all this traveling basically by himself, like with really little to no interaction whatsoever. So he's going through this process in complete solitude. And then this woman is the very opposite, and she's surrounded by people while also struggling to meet up with the person that she loves. So because she's overwhelmed by so many people telling her that this isn't going to happen, it like changes that perspective of her her attempt at trying to get through her journey with too many people. It's too overwhelming for her. What were your thoughts of that and just like the different situations and in both times?
Well, this is where I'm going to kind of slightly hint at story 2 and 3, only because I think thematically all of these four stories hint at the notion of kind of being in the present. And it's not to negate in terms of the love story that, they can't be fighting for each other, but in so trying to get to a future, they essentially, for all intents and purposes, kind of waste their lives. And yes, it has kind of a happy ending, but at what cost, right? And so again, I'm not advocating that they break up or they shouldn't have had that fight for each other, but as you sort of made mention, she was with other people, and it's like you can make the best of that situation, the reality that you're in. And I'll talk about why I think that relates to story 2 and 3 once we get to that. But as it relates to her, yeah, you got to find a way to live life in whatever the hell circumstance you are. And I don't think she did that. Um, does she come to regret it? I don't think so. Um, but it's an interesting mental battle that we see her struggle with throughout, I guess.
Yeah, and it's interesting when when someone who's by themselves trying to deal with a situation and how they go about it compared to someone who's surrounded by too many things and how they process things. So it's like these two completely different environments can really affect your outcome. And but the problem is with the women, she had other external factors now factoring into her problems. It's like it's because of everybody else she failed, or so to speak, is like why everything kept, um, failing while all of her meetups weren't coming out because it was because of other people. It's like if the inconvenience of other people is inconveniencing her. Um, so I think we both understand that. And what were your thoughts of the like? I want to speak like this one clear moment that you can see where they're lining up, where they're this like old shackle of a room, and you know that there were like post-its left over, talking, communicating to each other years from each other, that like I was here, I was waiting for you. And that was like the one moment where they actually finally got to the same place, not at the same time, but the same place, and saying that they were at one point still in love and still waiting for them.
What I think about it, yeah, I mean, the way it's done, it's a very sort of beautiful moment. You know, you can't help but sort of cry in some sense. Like just be moved by
Mhm.
the enormity of it, given the obstacles, right? In all things, the greater the obstacle, and if you can overcome it, the more joy you feel, right? Uh, the Olympics just happened. Take an Olympian, training their whole life to get to that one particular moment, and just you don't even know how to embrace the emotions. You're ecstatic, you're crying, you're overjoyed, you're speechless, you're this, you're that. So it's similar, right? Uh, it's an achievement beyond words in that moment when you've been fighting so hard without certainty. Like they've
Right.
and you talk about a hope and a prayer. They had even less than that. So that's what makes it special, ultimately. Um, so I don't know. That's the way I would describe it. Do I have more? I don't know. I'll just keep repeating myself.
No, I agree. And I think in this moment, it's like, because you saw both of these characters, like, literally have this one iota of hope left for both of them. They're like, maybe they're still there. Maybe at the end of all of this, hopefully there is at least someone there at the end waiting. And I think that that was the overall theme of love and loss. Is it better? Well, I'm going to say better, but like to have the idea of that love is out there worth waiting for. And I think that's what people who haven't gone through that, if their love really was that powerful enough to keep them going for 170 years, which is in that time, you think those are more than one lifetimes. That's multiple lifetimes. It's like, so the idea that love's transcendent literally generations. That's also romantic and poetic in and of itself.
Yeah, and it seems to have developed more on her side, right? For him, it seemed a little bit more instantaneous, whereas she kind of kept pushing him away initially, it seemed like. but he didn't back down. As I recall, she was kind of disowned by her family to some degree. So, I mean, just that in of itself are what most love stories are about, right?
Hmm.
This was that, as I said, exponentially taken, where it's like, okay, cool, we love each other, we have to face our parents, blah blah, we have to do this. Oh, and by the way, we've got to wait a little bit. Okay, cool. Oh, and by the way, there's interstellar travel. It's like, wait, what? So there's a lot of elements to overcome, and yeah, I mean, I just the genius to keep all these balls in the air, so to speak, by the author. That to me is the brilliance. So kudos,
Yeah.
kudos.
So overall, I did enjoy this bittersweet ending because they do end up finding each other in their own way. Not necessarily together, but they did meet up at one point. So you're like, is that a satisfactory ending? I think for all that they went through, yes. Knowing that there was at least one point where they crossed paths. You're like, okay, something came out of that. Whew. All right, let's get into story 2 and 3, which is we had the profit of corruption and that one life, which is I feel like the translations between cultures, this might get a little convoluted, actually a lot convoluted when it comes to just the themes and how like the actual breaking down of prophets to second generation to third generation. But basically it starts off with this main trio of characters. They can basically split themselves from each other, and their split personalities, people, they are now called prophets. They're called second, third generation. But the more you split, the more they become more autonomous. They create their own thoughts and ideas and beliefs. They become more individual compared to their original counterpart. And the counterpart is like so ingrained with like, if everything fails, they can just remerge into ourselves and we'll start over again. It's like clay, you take this big dough of clay, you split it up in little things. If those little pieces fail, you can just mush back together and start over. Not quite the case, but that's like the easiest way that I can simplify it. So like all these splits, um, they are now becoming more corrupted, quote unquote, because they are building their own beliefs, thought systems, processes. And it is a reflection of what the world is like, what humans are like. You know, how children's are different from their parents. They have some beliefs and values that are the same, but at the end of the day, ultimately, they are their own people. And that's where all these other things come involved: free will, um, just like these overarching themes of like what is original, what is your own, what can you control, what is a part of you. That's a very, very, very convoluted way of explaining it. But your thoughts of just like the idea there's a big entity, you split them off, and they have their own lives in them of themselves.
Yeah, so I'll give you my sort of interpretation of it, which isn't different than yours necessarily. I just have a
Right.
different way of explaining it, perhaps, and maybe
Yeah.
that'll help
Probably
orient
better,
people.
more.
No, I don't think better. I think collectively will
Yeah.
allow
We'll
the
get there.
listener to maybe grasp it a little better. But my interpretation of it was that you know if there's the secular life, which is our world, and then let's say if you die, you go to heaven. That's kind of like the quote unquote true realm, and that's controlled by a god, right? So like there's these layers. So I viewed it through that lens as an entry point. And these sort of beings within heaven, as I'm going to term it for the simplicity of the explanation, they understand truth and whatever else, and so their spirits get taken into the real world. And at first there's like animals, but then eventually there was more and more humans because they corrupt things. So it's like a commentary on our real world. And then the way when they come back, they kind of realize things more, right? And what's interesting to me is that like all of these are like experiments, right? Where the higher realm, like the gods or God, has created these heaven beings that like spirits that get thrown down. So there's layers, and they're experimenting, right? And there's not a good or bad necessarily to it. They're just trying things out of like, okay, well, what if we don't recall the memory when they get sent down, right? And that's what creates even further splits from that personality because their spirit, even though it's been alive for, you know, hundreds of millions of years, let's say, they don't recall that, no different than like if we and our souls are reincarnated. I don't remember what I was what I reincarnated from necessarily, right? So that's how I kind of viewed it, and to me, that's interesting because we think of you know God as having this sort of agenda and this order of things, and this is much more experimentational. Um, and where it goes, what I found the most intriguing, I guess, two aspects of it. Number one, that ultimately, right, we as humans in our day to day, so story aside, but we can contemplate a God, a universe. We try to find the truth of the world, and maybe we're nudging towards it, maybe we're not. I don't know, but I think there's an aspect that Amon, the character, represents of no matter where you are, this is your reality, and just live the best you can in whatever you know. Right? Because there was that one point where they were in like the middle, tier two realm, and it's like, this
Mm-hmm.
is the truth. But then they found out there's a higher truth. And it's like, again, you just have to take what you have, try to expand your reality into actualization as much as possible, but know that you're going to be limited no matter what, and try to do the best wherever you are. That's what I took away from it. And then two, which is related to that, I believe Naban, right, ends up being the one. Naban realizes that it's not Amon who's corrupt because he saw Amon as the corrupt entity that was ruining everything. When in
Right.
reality, it's as I understood it, it started because Naban saw Amon as corrupted. So it wasn't the fact that Amon was in fact corrupted. It's that Naban saw him as corrupted, and by introducing the thought, now you've inserted corruption into the thing. And what does that mean? I don't know. But there you go. I've exhausted myself.
Yeah, no, it does get very confusing. So it's Prophet Nabam basically starts it all, even though he's an entity of a bigger, older being who was like it's just like mentioned once, but like basically Naban's like the main deity. His split is Amon, who is a generation below him, um, and but like Naban's personality thinks that Amon is corrupted because Amon is having all these other different external thoughts that Naban didn't have. Therefore, the corruption is like, and when you split from Amon into the third generation, they're also corrupted because they're now having their own individual. So this is like where the free will goes in, and like everybody's existentialism are everything else but your own. You're like, God forbid, pun intended, that like you have your own thoughts and your own opinions about what's happening in the world. So Amon basically, he's saying, you see all this bad stuff happening, you have the power to stop this. Why don't you just restart it, kind of like merge everybody back together, restart it, and now get rid of all the bad things that you don't like right now. Forget that and start over again. Hence the experiments. There's like, okay, we've established that this and this and this is bad, this and this and this is good. Let's start over, only keep the good. And but the problem is every time they re-emerge together and Naban, because every time you merge, those same thoughts from everybody else all get merged into one. So this is where everybody's millions of thoughts come together, and he still has the memory of all these lives now affecting him. But now he's like basically getting like injected with everybody else's humanity, quote unquote, and their morals and their ethics. And he's like, oh, maybe I'm the one that has the problem. It's not everybody else. It's like he's in some way experiencing some empathy from and sympathy from everybody else. It's like because he's experiencing and remembering what everybody else went through. He's like, oh, there is corruption. It's not just me, it's everybody. So this is where it gets confusing, where it's like, who is the higher being? Where did the corruption come from? It's like the chicken before the egg kind of thing. You're like, but it's also the power to stop things where they are, or the power to let things keep building up to what they're going to be. And the idea is like you have the power to take away the bad, but you allow it to still keep going. You allow it to build and get worse. Um, so just but that also reflects back to, like, again, I grew up very Catholic. I understand the whole God, Jesus, and Holy Spirit, the three entities. They're all basically one, but they are individually different. And all of us are children of God. Like at the end, it all comes back to God. And it's also like God gave us free will. It's like we are, as human beings, we have our own autonomy and we can do whatever the hell we want, despite being against what God wants for us. And we're like, no, you don't have the power over us anymore. We are our own beings. This is where the disconnect happens. It's the same thing. Like the second and third generation, the more they split off, the more they get disconnected from their original creator. And but so it's like, if you don't understand Catholicism and Christianity, and this is where different cultures clash with their perspectives of their deities and how gods work for them. Yeah, that's the only lens I could understand it
Yeah,
better, through the Catholicism.
sure, but I don't think it's that. Like, listen, I'm no religious expert in like Buddhism or any other sort of religion, but I can break it down in enlightenment terms, if you want to call it that. Um, so, it becomes very hard for humans to see themselves as a singular entity, right? You look at a tree, a lamp, whatever, it's like, well, we're made of the same things. They are atoms, blah, blah. There is not really separation. Yet we create a separation of like, I am different, right? Um, and further, like this, what's crazy to me, before I continue the explanation, is like she manages to create essentially her own religion and explaining the world in very concrete terms, right? Like, sure, you might look at it as like, okay, it's speculative and it's fiction, whatever, but it does explain the world in a lot of ways. Like, you can find this stuff, meaning, uh, you know, again, it doesn't really matter your version of God, but you can look at science and these or philosophy and understand that like we all come from a singular consciousness. So your consciousness, my consciousness, and I'll throw in Donald Trump's consciousness, right? Comes from the
Yeah.
same. Now, that's a scary thought for a lot of people, and obviously I use that very specifically. But what makes us different is then you get to, okay, that we come from the same consciousness, but then we have our own thinking mind and then our own actions, right? So even though we start from a singular, let's say, point of origin, there is that pathway forward, and that's what creates the separation. Now, we think we're different, but also we're not, because, again, another sort of aspect is, what are the top 5 collective unconscious beliefs? I'm not enough. I'm not worthy, right? Like those kinds of things. Well, if we're so different, how can we literally all fear the same shit? Right?
Right.
So it becomes very heady, but as I said, like I think her brilliance is in taking what exists in the real world and just wrapping it in a different packaging. And I love that. And it can break your mind, but it's rooted in what I believe very overall good foundation. So I don't know if there's a point there other than this should exist. You can explain it through Catholicism, you can explain it through Buddhism, you can explain it through whatever the hell this is. But it all kind of, I guess, for me to wrap it up, ultimately, I love whatever religion or philosophy can get past its own dogma, because then you get to the real truth, and very few people do. But when they do, I think that's beautiful, and I think this speaks to something akin to that. So I don't know. That's what I got.
I agree. Beautifully said. No, I think it is the universal theme. It's like, yes, we all are very similar in some aspects of our life, but because we all have different paths and different journeys and different experiences, that shapes us who we are. Therefore, we have our own individualism, and that's what the theme of this, Naban couldn't quite process. It's like, oh no, you are still me because you came from me, but not realizing they have their own different life completely separate from what they started off with. And that also translates into, Catholicism, to just people's journeys in general. You don't even have to be religious. It's like your life is completely different from mine, even though we have done a lot of things together. We are similar in a lot of different ways. We also very, at the end of the day, very different. And you take that concept, split it into millions over millions of years, you're like, those are collectively different lives that are completely different from where you started at the original point. And so by the end, they do all, Naban basically merges everybody together again, but is now overwhelmed with everybody's thoughts and memories. And he's like, oh, this is where the realization comes in. It's like, oh, the corruption does come from me. It comes from experiences. It comes from, like, now it's like someone getting clarity. Like, I see the bigger picture. Like, because he got everybody else's experiences too. Even though he didn't go through them, he remembers everybody's experiences, which is too much for him to handle. Um, and I think, therefore, the lesson was taught at the end, where, like, now that I am aware, what can I do better this time around once I start over again? It's like the whole covenant kind of thing. It's like God promising, he's like, all right, I don't like what I just created. I'm going to wipe out the world and start again. Hence, he sent in the big flood and Noah and all the ark and, all that. That's where the story comes in. It's like the covenant. It's like, all right, we're never going to do that again. We learned our lesson. And that's basically like Naban being like, all right, I learned my lesson. Now I know what to do properly this next experiment on. Onwards and upwards. But the whole themes of who's really our own entity, and at the end we find out that there's actually the second and third generation, because they were so far split and they merged, they created their own, like, internal, if I remember correctly, like this virus that, like, basically cut this third generation off from the first generation. And they're like, okay, we are literally our own independent generation. We can start anew from just us, and we can be the original point. So all the generations after us can now have their own lives. We are, yes, we started from Naban, but now we are our own. It's like America breaking off from England when we declared Declaration of Independence. It's like we are our own, and now we are starting our own generations from us. Again, there goes history. Now we're involving history, but, like, that's the best way that I could myself as a reader process what's happening, the differences between all these generations. It's a very heady
Yeah.
book. I wasn't expecting it, and I apologize for making us read such a convoluted book.
No, I mean, listen, I appreciate stories like this. I appreciate someone who can weave something like this and, overall do it in a way that is not necessarily easy to understand, but makes it tangible, right? And I do think it there's a core notion to it that yes, we should question and look for meaning and explanation and purpose in our own lives, but no different than I believe it's Ram Dass or someone else. Definitely not Deepak Chopra. We'll put him off to the side. But
I
one of
love
the
that.
more spiritual actual leaders, they were asked, what's enlightenment? And it was him and someone else on stage, and they said, you know what? Sometimes enlightenment is a good cup of tea with your friend. And they got up and left the stage and went to have tea. So that is to say that, like, yes, I think a life worth lived, as Socrates would say, is worth examining those things. But it's also a balance of like, okay, stay present in the moment, enjoy, and things like that. Because your head's going to explode if all you do is try to get to the singular point. And I think that's the balance of Naban and Aman is like, yes, there's a higher truth and we can go seek it, but also you're in this reality. So just enjoy the hell reality that you are in, regardless of what may or may not exist.
Yeah. We're here right now. We came from here, but we're right here. So enjoy and control whatever we can here. Be present in our current generation, our current moment.
Yeah. So,
Yeah. There's a lot. I mean, overall, very interesting. I don't know how one, again, one and four are related to three, two, and three numbers. It feels like one story just got tacked onto another one. It's like, here, let's put it all together and it's enough for a book. If you split them up and had their own books, I'd read both of them. I just wouldn't put them together in the order, in the broken up order that this book was.
well, again, I think it's meant to have you think about the passage of time, right? Because they both deal with that. Uh,
Yeah.
you know, individuality versus both have a love aspect to it, right? Aman loves Naban, or sorry, Naban loves Aman despite
Hmm.
quote his corruption. So I think there are, you know, deep down universal themes when you just like literally create one word phrases. But how they explore that obviously vastly different. So,
Yeah. And like the differences between being influenced by multiple people, multiple ideas, compared to being influenced by only one. Um, yeah, it's just like, yeah, you have those common themes within these stories. Yeah, it's a lot. But
yeah,
I'm glad we talked about it because, like, even I was having a hard time processing it, but talking about it, like, I'm understanding it more now. This is why we do book club.
yeah.
um, yeah.
Well, this is one of those
Whew.
books. Like, I invite anyone listening to this, like, share us your thoughts. Like, listen, we did our best to unpack this. I'm sure, like, there's a college student writing a dissertation on this that's completely opposite of whatever the hell we said. And that's the beautiful part about it is that there is vast rooms for interpretation. We picked certain angles to try to dive at this with, you know,
Yeah.
but there's a million other ways you could enter this and come to a different conclusion. So I think that's the beautiful thing. And the only thing we would say is just be respectful in how you approach it in terms of, letting us know. But we're curious to hear your thoughts and we'll read them, you know? So,
Yeah. Um, and like I said at the beginning, Kim Bo Young. Haven't heard of this author, but I have heard of Snowpiercer. Um, that was a big story that came out. Well, that was exposed to us through the media and the masses. And like I personally enjoyed that story. So like knowing that this is the kind of work, and even that story is related to like being stuck in one place, but other people can influence an outcome. Um, Once you like get more people involved, and how that can vastly change, like if something is successful in the end or something fails in the end. So like it has. I can tell even with those two stories, like our current book and that story is like, yeah, it's the influence of other people in their outcome. um yeah, so like I'm actually curious to read more, but yeah, about I didn't know anything about Kim Bo Young. It was like she published 2 volumes collections, The Story That Goes That Far and An Evolution Myth. Um, and yeah, she's a regularly serves as a lecturer, juror, and editor in sci-fi anthologies, which we could definitely understand from this. And there's actually a an adaptation of this story. Um, they made a film, a Chinese film adaptation of this that was actually released not too long ago in December 2024, that focuses really just on the romantic couple, the husband and the wife. So it's really not about the prophet story, but about the time traveling romance story. So I'd be interested in seeing how that um, comes across on screen, especially with, I feel time is best shown. You can really only see time through film. So I think that would probably translate better to watch. So I'd be interested in seeing that. All right, Phil, what other books have you been reading for fun, if any?
Uh, Not too many, I don't think. I forget if I may have talked about this, but I have to put down The Sorcery of Thorns to complete this one. This book, not that thick, but it gets you going as far as um, you have to really work towards it. So I haven't had many. But as I made mention last time around, I've been doing audiobooks of ones of books that I've read. And so I'm kind of partly through Fellowship of the Ring with Andy Serkis doing
Nice.
the audiobook. And I think there's also a world of difference when you have like, no shame for other readers, but like there's just certain ones when you get a good narrator, it just makes it so engrossing. And obviously that costs time and money because you have to like really produce it. And Andy Serkis is like a phenomenal actor, so I'm having really fun with that. And as I said, it's just it's a way for me to revisit these books in a lesser sort of way, and come at them from a different perspective. Hearing them instead of reading them. So again, I have the familiarity, um, so that I'm picking up ones that I want to revisit. And Lord of the Rings is one of them so
Nice.
far.
Well, you mentioned one of our favorite people, Donald Trump, and it's just kind of amazing how unintelligent that man is. So I like in my own like personal kind of like self protest against him. I was like, he's not a smart man. So like, what do unintelligent men not read? So currently I'm reading The Playful Brain, which is basically just like explaining the science behind puzzles and what it actually does for our brain and how our brain processes situations differently and how we approach things differently compared to a logical aspect. And it gets more into the sciences, like the frontal temporal lobe does this for the brain, and it actually processes the spatial reasoning compared to the logistics of thinking like 1, 2, 3. You're actually thinking more outside the box of approaching a certain situation. So and the cool thing is it's talking about like the different types of puzzles that challenges our brains and the different parts of our brains. Like one is like crossword puzzles is more logic based. It's things based on things that you already know. So that's more recollection memory kind of puzzles compared to an actual puzzle, like physically putting together pieces together. And that's like a more visual aspect, which focuses on a different part of brain. So just, I love puzzles. I love so like why not put it all together in the brain science part. And then on the other part, I haven't started it yet, but it's definitely related to the genius within. So that's also talking about brains and how we think differently from those who think a certain one way. So it's like I haven't started it yet, but I'm also really so. Again, this is just like this is what nerdy people read. This is what people who like reading, who just like love learning about how things get processed. And I thought it'd be an interesting read for me, just like studying how our crazy brains work. Because I don't know if you notice, I'm very ADD. So it's just like my neurodivergency processes things way differently than the normal person. So, and you are a creative, you think in a different logical direction, but somehow we get to the same place. Um, yeah, so that's what I've been reading.
Ah, good
So
stuff. Good stuff. Yeah. No, I mean, it's like I said. I mean, in theme with this book, it's always great to just keep exploring, and having that sense of like, okay, I'm going to read this. I'm going to try to learn, but knowing that whatever I learn ultimately could be wrong, and I reserve the right to change my mind later.
yeah,
You know.
yep.
So
So
yeah.
upcoming books we have for next month, March of 2026, is your pick, The Lost Bookshop.
Yeah, so Evie Woods, The Lost Bookshop. Don't really know too much about it. Just seemed like a cool title, seemed to be recommended. So I was like, why not? Let's
I
do
have read
it.
it. Yes,
Uh,
I have
so
read it.
we'll read that one. And then, yeah, April is Marissa's pick, which, according to this, is TBD.
Yeah, actually, I think I did. Sorry if I'm gonna go like back into. I did choose a book for us. What did I? A Good Year by Peter Mayle. Or yeah, I believe that's how you pronounce. But I figured let's have a, because I like making us read very heady books lately. Let's make it simple for us and read a nice simple book of a man going to a vineyard, enjoying wine, enjoying life. And I know, Phil, you enjoy wine, you enjoy life. So I think it's a nice palate cleanser for us.
Sure, sure.
There was a movie adapted from this one. That was the Russell Crowe. Um, but yeah, it's this book, A Good Year.
Okay. Well, after that, we have How to Solve Your Own Murder by Kristen Perrin. I just love the title of that. And yeah, I think, something that we talked about with my friend and author Emily Krempholtz is, the beautiful thing. We try to run the gamut of various things, but ultimately, sometimes you have different seasons. And yeah, I think given the state of things, sometimes lighter. Right now, for me at least, I'm picking lighter is better sort of books. And in my, it's one of those things like we only get 12 a year, ultimately, you and I. But
Yeah,
there's books like, for me personally, I was looking up books that are like Kiki's Delivery Service, right? Which is like, kind of like Seinfeld-esque in the sense like it's a movie about nothing, and yet it's amazing. Why do people love it? And so I was like, well, there has to be Japanese books kind of in that vein. So I got some Japanese books, and one of the things I realized, I don't think we've read like African mythology. Those can be a little bit heady. I've read a few, but maybe at some point I'll pick that. But yeah, I think for the time being, I think my general direction for 2026 is just fun, light, and it's not to diminish those books. Like, obviously they have merit and things like that, and I think obviously they take a lot of effort and creativity to write. But yeah, I'm waiting for you, and other stories may have broken my brain a little bit, and I'm gonna
a little
for
bit,
with my
just a
picks
little bit.
to stay away from those for the time being. But I do
Yeah,
also want to
totally
read.
agree.
I am
Yeah, go
selfishly
for it.
like itching to read another R.F. Kuang book, which we did the Poppy War trilogy. Um, but I try, because we only get 12 a year, I try not to like repeat same authors because again,
Right.
we're trying to pick new stuff. But yeah.
Yeah, and
Anyway,
I try to just, yeah, I agree. My books have like are totally unrelated generally to each other. I think that's also a reflection of my ADD brain. I was like, oh, this looks fun. No, well, let's read this. But also, us being filmmakers in and of ourselves in our own rights, it's like I also really do love like this is what our show was originally created from, adapted, and I did love that concept of like adapted from the written original text. So our next book, so I like us reading a lot of adapted books too. So like we'll read Fight Club, a novel, never read the
Okay.
book, we know about the movie. The number one rule of Fight Club is don't talk about Fight Club, but the number one rule about the book, let's talk about it. So we're gonna like circumvent that and talk about Fight Club, which
Yeah.
ironically we're not supposed to talk about. So
Yeah, that'll be fun.
it'll
You
be
know,
interesting to see how it got translated, because we
yeah,
know I personally know the movie. I think it's safe to say you know it as well. I feel more people know about the movie than they do about the book. So we'll read that. It'll
yeah,
be fun.
yeah. And to go full circle with it, I applaud our selection of books. They are, for lack of a better word, eclectic, and I love that because, not to say, book clubs who focus on romance or whatever, sci-fi, like have at it. But I think we love the exploration of books. Our theme is books. Granted, we don't read a lot of nonfiction books. I don't think we've read one single one. So we're
We
more
read
about
your
fiction.
your your director James Burroughs. I think that was like our only
That was the
really
only one.
nonfiction one.
But yeah, so I love the collection of books we're trying to unearth for people. So kudos to us.
Yeah, and unearth for ourselves. I think that's what I do. If you go back into our library, they are very vast in a good way. Like we
Yeah,
don't just stick to one genre or one culture. Like we truly do love reading. And we are what you say. We run the gamut of books.
yeah, yeah. And as a closing thought for me, I love when you all respond with what you're reading. So please can continue to do that. I know you guys are amazing at recommending shit that we never read, but that doesn't mean we don't read the recommendation and it does get filed away. So I promise you
Yeah,
it's there somewhere. Are we doing any actual effort to try to get to them? No, but it's there. And
but we read
but
them.
we,
We read your recommendations.
yes, there's effort put into that.
And you know what? The year is still young. It was like we still have our choices left. We still might pick them for. We still there's still time for us to pick your recommendations. Who knows?
Yes, yes, indeed. All right, that's it for me.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you everyone for reading along with us, trying to process this very heady book. I'm sorry, but yet I'm not, because it was fun. It was like overall, I wouldn't say I disliked this book, because there were a lot of aspects of this book that I did enjoy, and we are here. We keep enjoying reading books, and we will see you for our next book.
If you found something useful, consider subscribing, liking, commenting, and sharing with friends, and you can explore my films, books, and writing at Svitek.com. And if you want deeper access, direct interaction, and ways to support my creative work, I have a Patreon page. Everything's linked in the description. However you engage, thanks for being a part of it.